Hi, family. Welcome back. We are back for season two, and I just wanted to say thank you so much. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joel Ojeda. I'm also known as the Bearded Ref, and I created this channel. I created the Gold Corner. When I initially created it, I didn't really know. I had an idea and I had a vision that I wanted to speak about these kids because when you have gone through what I and all these other parents have gone through, and you've been on an oncology floor, it makes you change your mentality completely. It makes you see life differently. And you see these real warriors, these true warriors that are walking around, these little kids, and you can really see, as I like to tell people, you can see the face of God in them because even though they're going through so much, they can still smile throughout the whole thing. So that is why I created the Gold Corner, and I just wanted to say thank you. We do have over 500 subscribers for season one. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And this is the first show for season two. I'm excited. We do have a lot more parents, a lot more beautiful, heartbreaking stories that we're going to be talking about here. So again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the love, for all the support that you're showing the YouTube channel and our support group on Facebook as well, the Gold Corner support group there. Again, thank you. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but thank you so much for doing that. We're also going to be launching merchandise here in the next couple of weeks with all that we collect. It's going to be going to childhood cancer research and to all these other great organizations that the parents have created, either in memory of their child or for their kids, that are still fighting. There's a lot of great nonprofit organizations out there that we have talked about, a lot more that we're going to be speaking about. And when I tell you people, when I tell you family to just do your homework and just, before you actually donate, a lot of commercials for these big name hospitals, big name organizations, but we really don't know where it's going. So just make sure that you do your homework before you donate anywhere else. So thank you so much, The Gold Corner, season two.
And now it's time for the main event. This is the moment you have all been waiting for. In memory of Mia Ojeda, dedicated to all the brave little warriors that have fought and the ones that are currently fighting childhood cancer. For the thousands watching around the world, fighting out of the Gold Corner, it's
I had the opportunity, we're going to be launching this first episode here, the opportunity to meet our next family through some support groups. And I had the opportunity to meet and see the story of little Alex, of this little warrior that has gone through so much and is still currently fighting. But when you see him and you'll see the pictures when they go up, you're going to see this beautiful smile, this beautiful baby boy. So I have the pleasure of having Jessica Vucish. So I pronounced that right. Jessica is joining us from Pittsburgh, from PA. So Jessica, thank you so much. We did have the opportunity to speak on several occasions. We met through support groups and we got to talking and I got to know a little bit more about Alex, and we were speaking here a little bit off camera. So Jessica, thank you so much for being a part of this. When I created this, I just wanted to be a voice for these children. 4% funding that we get for childhood cancer research is not enough. We somehow need to make a difference, and we will make a difference. So without further ado, family, I want to introduce you to Jessica. Jessica, speak to us about your warrior. The floor is yours.
Hi. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for doing this, though, because quite honestly, it's hard as an oncology family. It's really hard to find a voice and people who truly understand you and what you're going through and what it's like, the ups, the really low downs, and everything in between. I feel like, you're kind of thrown into it. It's a club you never want to be a part of. But if it were not for you, and if it were not for other people who were really trying to make a difference and trying to raise awareness about these kids, like I feel like we wouldn't be making as big of a difference as we are right now. And I feel like it definitely needs talked about more, and it definitely needs something that needs to be brought a little bit more to the light. I certainly knew of childhood cancer before my child was diagnosed, but not enough. And it kind of still makes me sad to this day that I didn't know and wasn't educated better before this. But my little warrior, his name is Alex. He was diagnosed around the age of 2.5, actually on Mother's Day of 2020. Alex was a completely normal kid. The biggest thing that he ever went through was he needed ear tubes to correct some ear infections that he was having as a child whenever he was 1. And I remember just not sleeping for a week, and in the anticipation of that, and the idea of him going under for anesthesia freaked me out more than anything in the world. And, crying when they rolled him back. And, hindsight, I look at it now and just go, what has this warrior, this kid been through, and how far he's come? But it's been a scary road for us. But he's definitely a normal kid otherwise. He had a great upbringing. We did have Alex in the summer of 2017. He, obviously living in Pennsylvania, was always outside, always in the pool, literally living like a little boy. We have a lot of family who lives down in Florida too, so we would go and travel there during the summers, and he would spend his time running on the beach and chasing seagulls and just doing incredible things. And when we finally got the diagnosis, it kind of really shattered us. A week before, truly we started noticing differences. It really was not something that came on over a long time. Looking back, we definitely notice now that there were some signs, but nothing that can be described other than just being a toddler. For a long time, Alex had trouble sleeping, and a toddler doesn't really sleep well at night. But finally, our gut just told us something was wrong. We took Alex to the pediatrician, I want to say 3 to 4 times before his diagnosis. And at that time, we were actually pregnant with a second son. And due to the state of the world, obviously in 2020, back in March when we took him for the first time, we really were just inside. We stopped going outside. We stopped seeing people. So the pediatrician really just said, he's probably really bored. You're also very pregnant. So it's probably something that he's just feeling a little rambunctious, like he needs out, he needs some kind of, stimulation. Then baby was born, and that was really when things started to get bad. We started to notice that he would not want to leave my side. We started to notice that he stopped eating. And then finally the red herring was that he started to lose his mass on his arms and his legs, but his stomach was distended. Alex had always been kind of a chubbier kid, not in the way that he, had a lot of chub, that was like abnormally, but he was a pretty like normal sized kid, but he always had meat on his arms. And to see him as a stick with his stomach just concerned us. We had Dominic, our second son, and as soon as we came home from the hospital, my mother-in-law, who had watched him, said, "There's just something wrong." It kind of hit us then that there was something, but never in our life did we ever think cancer. It was just something that completely blindsided us. So Alex, we went in the day before Mother's Day. We went to our local hospital, which was in the Westmoreland area, not a children's hospital, just a regular hospital itself. They took one x-ray of Alex and immediately sent us to Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. Didn't tell us anything at the time. We were still actually thinking that this was a blockage. Maybe he was having some intestinal problems. My nurse, I'll never forget her, the nurse and the overnight doctor that was there with me that night, After wheeling us down and trying to get, I want to say 4 to 5 ultrasounds of his stomach, woke me up on Mother's Day morning at 7 a.m. to tell me that they found a mass. And still to this day, it is just one of the most hollowing memories that I have. Michael, my husband, was home with the baby. I was worried about him driving to the hospital, so I didn't tell him right away. I just said, you need to come. And when he got to the hospital, we reconnected. The oncology team, we met for the first time. And they told us they had found a large tumor. The tumor itself was actually the biggest thing in Alex's body at the time. It was 17 centimeters long and 13 centimeters tall. It had pretty much pushed everything to the side and had been affecting him for more than half of the year, and we had no idea. It was something that just the x-rays and the ultrasounds alone, when we looked at the images, were shocking. You could not see his spine. His liver was smushed like a pancake against his stomach. Nothing was working correctly, and all of his levels were off. I think the one thing that makes me the most upset about everything was it was a simple blood test, a simple blood work that could have told us there was something a little bit wrong, that would have led us to this a little bit sooner. It was definitely something that was shocking, as you never think of it as your child. We actually have a rare experience, I hope, of knowing a little girl who was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, who lives 3 homes down from us. Something that is so rare, has 2 kids living on one street. And it's just bewildering to me that we did not know more about it, that there's not more talk about it, and that this was our experience with neuroblastoma. We had known of the little girl down the street, and we had always seen her playing, but it was never something that after, knowing her and after, going through and watching her journey and seeing her come out the other side, never thought of twice. And then for it to happen to your own child, she called me that morning and said, I'm just so sorry. There are no words I can say. And it's just truly what it is. It was something that changed our world forever. Our first stay in the hospital was a total of 48 days consecutively. And it was probably still to this day, the hardest time that we've had. Alex, because his tumor was so big, they wanted to start round 1 chemo right away. It was very immediate that they needed to find out what was going on. They biopsied the tumor right away and put in his double lumen Broviac. And whenever he got it in, I remember thinking that was the scariest day of my life. Hindsight again was that was not true. And we were about to experience some of the hardest days. Alex didn't take well to round 1 of chemo. His stomach started to become even more distended. It got to a point, and I have a picture as well to include in this, but it got to a point where he looked pregnant. His stomach was so distended, you could see all of his veins popping out of his stomach. And yet we were being told that this was normal. This was something that happens, and it can happen, and it's not rare. We were getting lab work every morning at 8 o'clock. And every morning we would start at a hemoglobin of around 9. And by the next morning, we would be at a 5 or a 6. And we noticed he was starting to lose a lot of blood. We didn't know where the blood was going, but his stomach was getting more distended. With every ultrasound and every x-ray that we took, it did look like there was fluid buildup in his abdomen, but we truly thought at the time that it was just buildup from the chemo itself, from all of the effects that it has on the organs. Because the tumor was so big, it was hard to see the organs, hard to see where they were. What we learned, and I'm shaking talking about it, but what we learned was that the tumor was wrapped around many vessels that led to many organs in Alex's body. And one of the vessels was the hepatic artery that led to the liver. What had happened was when we gave him round 1 of chemo, his tumor hated us. His tumor started to his tumor started to soak in all of the blood in his body and the blood that it was collecting from its vessels. And it started to ooze it back into his abdomen. With doing that, the tumor kept on growing. And what ended up happening was the tumor got so big that it cut off the valve to the hepatic, or cut off the hepatic artery to the liver itself. We didn't really have any warning signs of there being liver distress because we were not drawing liver numbers, because we did not know to check for the liver. We were checking his normal white blood cell count, red blood cell count, just normal things that you would. Nothing to do with inflammation quite yet. When we drew those labs, they were extraordinary. So we drew his liver numbers the day before we started round 1 of chemo. They're called ALT and AST numbers. They judge how the liver is working and how it's responding to everything. He was at a respectful 35 for his ALT and a 14 for his AST at that time. When we drew them, when we realized there was a problem, probably, I want to say 14 days later, he was at 30,000 and 42,000. And what we learned was my child that was sitting in a bed talking to people, who was smiling and having conversations with people, was going into liver failure. The only signs that we had that my husband and I caught was we were in the room with him and he sparked a heart rate of 192. And he started to foam a little bit by the mouth. At first, they said, could this just be him spitting bubbles? And we said, no, something was wrong. So we packed up our things after mourning the diagnosis of cancer. We packed up our whole room that we had at the hospital, full of his toys and his clothes, and we headed down to the PICU. When we were in the PICU, that's when the reality of everything hit. We were told within the first hour of being there that Alex was in distress. He was going into liver failure, but he was also having bleeding issues, which we couldn't define. But one doctor told us that he believed that it was HLH, which unfortunately we knew nothing about. They told us HLH is something that is either genetic or something that cannot be diagnosed. If Alex did have this, then he had 3 weeks. And they told us the combination of the two is very hard to treat. The combination of the internal bleeding and the HLH. At that time, we asked the hospital, we said, we have had no visitors. COVID was real, and we hadn't been able to see our newborn, and we hadn't been able to have our family there. We asked them, is Alex in such distress that our family needs to come? And they told us yes. And they allowed our family to come in and see Alex. At that time, we didn't know what was going to happen. And we truly prepared for the worst. It was something that I will never forget. I will never understand how you can live through that, through that understanding of you just have no control. It was because of a surgeon and the PICU doctor at the time who was on, the decisions that they made for Alex, that he is still here. I truly don't understand what we would have done if we would have stayed in room 19 upstairs on the cancer floor and just considered it as something that was normal. We truly went down at the exact right time that we needed to. We immediately put Alex on life support. He was on life support within a few hours of moving down to the PICU. And that's when the work began. We then did numerous different things to try to get him back. We had a surgeon who went in and stented a vessel that was feeding the tumor itself. Because of that, the tumor had no more control in soaking up his blood and oozing it back into his abdomen, which gained us time. From there, we drained the blood that was in Alex's abdomen. When they came and told us that it was 3 liters that they drained out of my little child, I couldn't even imagine that it was. But they drained 3 liters of blood out of his stomach. They then continued to do plasmapheresis to try to get the liver back and try to regenerate. I hate to say it like this, but we were very lucky it was the liver. I never want to think of that as a lucky time, but we truly had the hand of God on us that it was liver and not anything else, because liver is a phenomenal organ that does regenerate. And with the help of plasmapheresis, time, draining the fluid, and trying to stop the tumor from doing what it was doing, we were able to truly get him back. And it was 2.5 weeks Alex was on life support. And eventually it got to the point where he was fighting the sedation so hard that he had no control but to wake up. He was on a drip of 4 fentanyl and waking up on his sedation. So we were out of time. We had to wake him up. And then for 2.5 weeks more after that, we had to nurse him back to health. We had to try to get him back. And it's just something to this day that I will never forget that time. In the time in the PICU, it was truly something where Alex was in dire need of time. And we were lucky enough to have the time with him and to have the surgeons who were there to be able to help him get back. In that time, Alex had lost a ton of weight. He was not able to move his arms or his legs. He developed a foot drop because of the fact that he hadn't been walking. It took us months to get him back to normal health after that. But yet somehow, after we moved from the PICU to the cancer ward, we were told we had to go through with round 2. And that time was of the essence. And it was the scariest thing to go through, was to try to understand what we had just gone through, but then at the same time, put him through it again. And it was something that you don't have the strength to do, you just do. You do your research, you take other opinions, you ask other families who've gone through it, and you figure out if that is the best way to go. And that was the best way to go for Alex. We were confident that his liver had regenerated enough that we needed to continue to try to kill this tumor, because this tumor was ravishing everything. So we continue with round 2. And then we went home for 3 days. And then we were back. We consecutively, for the first 4 rounds, spent 5 months in the hospital. And it was a long time. It was a long time for him not to be a kid, for him to go through these treatments, and for him to battle like this. He didn't know a normal life anymore. He just knew cancer, and it was sad. He didn't know that he had a baby brother at home. Every time we would come home, he would interact with them, but he wouldn't know. We'd have to keep on reminding him. He was scared of everybody at the hospital at first. It was something that dressing changes were 5 people in a room holding him down to a bed. These kids don't understand, and you can't make them understand. They're just too little for this to be their reality. And he finally got to the point where, with the help of child life and the help of other things, that it got manageable, but it was still hard. He knew the moment that if we left, that we were coming back. And anytime we would wake him up at home, he would think we were a nurse or a doctor waking him up to do something to him. After all we went through, somehow we had to go through with the surgery, and we knew that that was the best option. We consulted our doctors, we consulted our surgeon, we consulted other hospitals, and we felt confident in the surgeon that we had at Children's. And to this day, we love him like he's another part of our family. It was a 15-hour surgery. It was the longest day of our lives. I have a before and after as well of the tumor, and if it's okay, I'll share that as well. But the tumor had significantly shrunk, which was a blessing. It was not gone. There was still a lot of work to do. But compared to the tumor that had taken over and ravished his body, it, we believe, died when we cut off the valve originally when he was in liver failure. We owe that moment to a lot of his success. We think that once we cut off the central source of the tumor and the fact that it was not getting any other blood, that it was not able to do as much damage. The problem with that was that we had killed the tumor too much in the way that it had, as the surgeon put it, liquefied inside of Alex, which made it very hard to remove. It was at the same time as being liquefied, still attached to everything in his body, into his vessels, into his organs. It had, because the liver took such a hit, also formed with the liver. And we did not know at the time what we were about to go through after the surgery because of how close the tumor and the liver were mended together. Alex's surgery went well. There were a few hiccups, as with anything to do with cancer. The surgery had a lot of internal bleeding that needed controlled, as well as Alex got another foot drop from having his feet obviously not being able to be moved for 15 hours, or sorry, for as long of his time as it was, the 15 hours at that point. They were moved, but they were not used. So the surgeon did make sure to move the position, but what we believe happened was there was some nerve damage. It was another long couple months to get him back to health. At the time, we thought the surgery went phenomenal. We thought it went fantastic, and it did in many ways. They're thinking of a 15-hour surgery against a tumor that was that large. We were lucky. We were very, very lucky. And we had an amazing surgeon who was able to get that out. But when he was taking away at the tumor that was attached to the liver, we then had a lot of internal fluid issues. So at the same time that Alex was recovering from his surgery, we had to keep on going back in and removing pockets of fluid that had collected. We debated whether or not he was healthy enough to do this. If we needed more time if this was something that was going to resolve on its own. But the problem with cancer, and I only laugh for comfort, the problem with cancer is that there is no time. You don't have time. You always have to just keep on going, and you have to keep on moving, because the only other option is to not do anything. And we didn't have that option. We continued on with removing the fluid and trying to figure out exactly where it was coming from, if there was something that we could remove. And then at the same time, if this was something that was going to be able to be resolved long term. In this span of time, doing all of these surgeries, Alex had many complications. He started to have fevers and started to have bacteria grow. And what we came to find out was that there was an infection growing inside of him. We thought that we had it under control. We thought that it was something that was manageable. We had put off his bone marrow transplant for so long. Our original plan was to start his bone marrow transplant after the surgery, truly. But during round 4, which involves a drug called cisplatin, which I'm sure many cancer families know of, cisplatin is wonderful for many things, but it's terrible to these kids. It's poison, and it was causing damage to Alex's hearing. So we decided to add on around 5 of chemo to lower the dose of the cisplatin in round 4. So after the surgery, we then moved on to the fact that we had to do one more round. After that, Alex had his scans, which every parent talks about, scanxiety and everything to do with, finding out if everything is okay, and, the fear of what if it's not. And we had a lot of fear because Alex's story, unfortunately, if it could go wrong, it did go wrong. There were a lot of people that called Alex Mr. Curveball in the hospital because he always seemed to have something wrong. And it's always a slight chance that it could happen. And it happened to Alex. So we were very nervous about these scans. But when we got the call to hear that he was NED and that he had no evidence of disease, it was a great day. We knew we had come far. We understood that Alex fought so hard, but we didn't realize how much it would mean to hear that. We really had been through just so much. And I hope and I pray to God that Alex does not remember this. But I felt like in that moment, we had a slight win. I knew we had a still long battle because the bone marrow scared the absolute crap out of me. But we had come a long way. So I had hope that Alex would do well. Alex is Alex. So he decided to make his own path for bone marrow. We got delayed for 2 months. We were supposed to start at the beginning of October. We started at the end of November, right around Thanksgiving. His actual transplant day, his stem cells, when he got them back, was on Black Friday. And I kept on thinking, this is it. We're going to be done. As soon as we get through this, radiation, everything else that's come should be on the easier side. There's nothing that should be worse than what he's been through. And then we started seeing symptoms, and we started seeing things again that brought back that feeling for us that just something was not right. Anybody who knows bone marrow and who goes through a stem cell knows of mucositis. You don't know it till you see it, though. It was always listed as a side effect, but we had no idea what it meant. We had done our research, and we knew what it could be. Alex was in the top 5% as far as symptoms for his mucositis. He had ulcers all along his gums on the outside, all the way into the inside, leading down his esophagus. He was in immense pain. So we started him on narcotics. We started him on drugs that his little body shouldn't even know. But we started him on some really hard narcotics to hopefully get us through that point. After we started those, we realized that it wasn't helping. And we started to think it may be something else. That's when we found out that Alex had started his fevers again. And the pocket of fluid that we were worried about, the pocket of fluid we turned out to be an infection. On day +3 of his bone marrow, only a few days into his bone marrow treatment, Alex was sitting at a heart rate of 214 in bed. Could not get his fevers under control. He was reaching temperatures of 105 and 106. Again, we were told this is something that can happen with bone marrow transplants, and we should wait out the night and see what should happen. I called my husband because in the world of COVID, we wanted to try to only keep it to one parent to try to stop any risk of infecting Alex with anything. Because not only were we going into bone marrow transplant in the world of COVID, but we were also going in during a time where flu and everything else that any child goes through catches more easily in the fall when people are really spreading things around. I called my husband and I said, you need to come down. Something is wrong. It was that night that we begged the doctors and said, we need a PICU nurse or a PICU doctor to come up and look at him and to see if they need to see him. We had been told multiple times that Alex was most likely going to end up in the PICU, but they just weren't sure when. And when the PICU nurse and the PICU doctor came up to see him, they said, we're going to take him. It was 2:45 in the morning. And here we were again, packing up the room. This time I did myself a disservice and I printed photos that were on the walls of our sons together and a life that we had before cancer, thinking that this was going to be an easy trip. When we decided to move, we knew something was wrong again, and we knew something was happening. When we got down to the PICU that morning, well, a few hours later, since we moved at 2:40 something in the morning, our bone marrow team came on and they said that was the right decision because Alex was past the point of controlling. At 7:00 that morning, we had to put Alex on life support again because Alex was going into septic shock. And this time, seeing him put on life support was a lot worse. The PTSD of the last time really kicked in for Mike and I. And it was just something that was, once again, no parent should have to see. They had to peel me off of Alex because I did not want to leave the room. I kept on telling them, just let me be in here. I don't care. I want to see him. And if it was not for our oncologist who was there that night and stayed with us, I would have been in the room. It was the right decision to make because as soon as we put him on life support, we realized the severity of everything that was going on. Because not only did Alex have severe mucositis, he had severe septic issues. He was clearly going into septic shock, but he had also contracted VOD, which was scary with his liver failure. VOD affects the organs. And again, when we drew his liver labs, they were elevated past a point of concern. We then worked quickly against the clock, and we tried to get his fevers under control, and we tried to fight to get him back. And yet again, we didn't know what was going to happen, because here we are with the most severe symptoms that could happen, and they were happening to him. And to us, it was something that it was hard enough to see him go through it once, but to see your child on life support twice in 1 year, twice in a few months, was hard. Michael and I kept on doing our research. We kept on researching what was going on, things that we could do. That, along with our team, which truly, once we got to the PICU, once we got our oncologists and our bone marrow team together, that was what got Alex back. The first, we were very concerned. As each day went, we got a little bit more relief when we started seeing Alex come back to Alex. His pigment in his skin, because of all the chemos and the drugs and everything that we had done to him, had darkened. He looked like a different kid. We were dealing with deconditioning again. Thankfully, this time we had an NJ2, which was allowing him to have some type of nutrition to keep up his health of his organs. But we were truly battling against the VOD and keeping his organs wet enough, but also dry enough. Because in a bone marrow transplant, you don't want the organs to be wet. You want them to be dry, because VOD is specifically the reason why you don't want them to be wet, because there could be severe damage. So every day we fought. And once again, after 2 weeks, we finally got to a point where we were comfortable talking about getting Alex off of ventilation and talking about getting him back off of life support. We still had a long road to go, but we were talking about it, and there were conversations. Alex, being Alex, though, 2 days after starting those conversations, decided to extubate himself. This kid who had been on such strong medications, nothing touched him. He was on fentanyl, Ativan. He was on ketamine. He was on drugs that should knock out an adult. And yet he was awake. And he mustered, while we were all rounding the hall, to pull the tube out of his mouth, balloon and all, and extubate himself. At that point, it was scary, but we knew he was strong. We knew he was going to fight, and we knew that we would be able to get him back. At that point, we spent another week and a half down in the PICU, just making sure everything was okay, making sure Alex's fevers were under control, which we battled with every day. The VOD was improving, but it hadn't gone anywhere. The mucositis had resolved, except for in his ulcers, in his intestines. That was still around. So he wanted nothing to do with food or drink. Still to this day, we're battling that. And the septic shock, this kid once again surprised us and was able to come out of it without needing any kind of special support for the septic shock. We still battle with that intestinal infection. To this day, Alex is actually labeled as somebody who has to be quarantined and somebody who has to be in isolation. So he's no longer allowed to just roam the hospital. He has to be in a room, because at any moment, if he contracts something with that bug that he has, it could be bad. So we will take that any day of the week compared to what it could have been. And just looking back at everything now, we were in two dire straits during this first half of his treatment. Cancer is no walk in a park. And it's not what these commercials make it seem out to be. And it's something that to this day, I am angry at myself for not knowing before I heard the words, "My child has cancer." I understand that there's other things in the world, but when it comes to these kids, they deserve so much better. They deserve so much more attention for this. I get so much support from these family groups and so much support from this community that we have all made online. I have gotten more support this way than any other way that any other organization could give me. It's time for these kids to be heard. It's time for their stories to be known, because these kids deserve more. These kids deserve better treatment, better things than chemo, better things than these drugs that they give them. I understand it's to kill a tumor and to kill cancer cells, but there has to be a better way. We have to find a way to do this correctly, where these kids don't have to not just worry about their cancer, but worry about the long-term effects that these drugs can do to children. It's nothing that is proven right now, because science is always going to advance. But we had to sign a waiver saying that Alex may not be able to have children in the future because of this treatment he has to go through to save his life. Us as parents had to make that decision for him. And that's nothing compared to the side effects that we have to sign off for these drugs for him to go through to try to get his cancer under control. There are things in this world that have taken a lot less time to get approved and a lot less time and to get more awareness for. And I feel like it's about time that these kids deserve to be front and center for that. My child has cancer, and we will always be battling cancer for the rest of his life because of the effects of these treatments, because of the effects of what he went through. I do have to say, we love our oncologists. We love our bone marrow team. But we have also had to become informed. We have also had to become educated. We've also had to step up as parents and understand everything he's going through. And because of that, we're wiser. But when you see those cute little kids on TV, and Alex is one of them, he's one of those kids who will smile through anything, and you won't know everything he went through until you hear his story. And I hope that he continues to tell his story even after this. I hope we have the opportunity that he does, and he's able to have the chance to do that. But his cancer fight is not over. Just because he's NED and we went through a bone marrow transplant does not mean that he's in remission. I get comments and messages like that every day. Like, "Oh, good, you're done." And it's not. You're never done. Alex is not healthy enough to do the radiation here that's offered at our home hospital in Pittsburgh. In the next few weeks, we're projected 14th to the 20th of January, we will be in Cincinnati getting proton radiation because Alex's body is not healthy enough to continue with regular, on his schedule, on his clinic radiation. Because of what he's went through, he can no longer do that. So we have to travel and we have to get this done in other places. But the thing that I question is, why is this not standard? Why Are we thinking about traveling to get this done because my child is not healthy enough, and not considering every child that has to go through this? Every child that has to go through this radiation. I know of a family who messaged me after we announced that we were going to Cincinnati, saying what a blessing it is that you are going, because the effects that the radiation did to my son, we are still battling. That should never be the case. We need better treatment now. Alex will go through radiation. He'll go through 14 days of it, intense radiation. We will come home. We will do a treatment that's called the chimeric, which is an antibody that's going to be fused with my son to try to kill any cancer cells left in his body. It's a mouse protein that's being mixed and put into my son. We will then go through therapy for his maturing of his cells. He has one adrenal gland left. They had to remove one during the surgery. They want to try to mature it. So he has to get Accutane, which is an acne medicine given to teenagers and adults to try to mature his body, to try not, or to try to have the best chance of not relapsing, because neuroblastoma is known for a relapse. Saying all these things now, if I had told myself this in May when we got diagnosed, I don't know if I would have had the strength to go through it, to watch my child go through with it. But one thing Alex has taught me is that he is strong. These kids go through so much, and yet they can smile and laugh. But we need to stop just looking at these good times. We need to start realizing that it's so much more than that. It's so much more than just cute kids sitting in a bed. They're away from their friends. They're away from their families. They're away from their siblings. They're being put through life-threatening treatments. Our oncology team is working constantly to try to do research and to try to find better ways. We talk about things and they have to cut us off because they're specifically not allowed to talk about it because of the fact that nothing is given as far as funding. Nothing is given to try to find better ways. And although there are so many ideas out there, we are stuck with protocols that were made 10, 20, 30 years ago. We are lucky. Science is getting better. And I hope and I pray for a day where we don't have to have these protocols and where we don't have to go through this. But as of today, these kids are battling. My child is battling. Your child is battling. Everybody who's watching this, we should know more. We should be better informed. We should be better educated.
We should, Jessica, and you touch on that, and that is one thing that I preach to the choir every single time, is the lack of funding, the 4%. And looking at various websites and doing some research, a lot of these chemos, a lot of these medications or protocols are the same ones that were being done 30 years ago. Yes, science has advanced, okay, but where do our children fit into this advancement of science, advancement of medicine? And that's what triggers me. That's what gets me upset. And yes, okay. And before we got the news that our children were diagnosed, we were not cancer parents. We became cancer parents when that happened. So yes, we're being advocates now, and we've done our research now. And you're right. I when you're telling the story, of course, a lot of parents are going to relate. I relate almost identical to yours, because it's neuroblastoma, and that's what ultimately took my baby. But we have that. Well, we don't know what to do. We're limited on options, and hey, you can't be at home. We're gonna have to send you out to get this next thing done. And that's what happened to us. We were 12 hours from where we live, and My daughter didn't even die here in El Paso, in my hometown. She passed away 12 hours from here, you know. And you're right, that lack of funding. And I don't know, I just get so irate. I
Oh,
get livid when speaking about this, and for all these kids, for all these children, and like you said, and I remember we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House in Fort Worth, and there's pictures of my daughter there where she's smiling. And I had more than one people say, "Oh my God, look at that smile! It looks like she was having a great day." When not even an hour before those pictures, she was in so much pain because of chemo, and they don't see that. And that's where these big name hospitals commercials come in and catch the kids when they're smiling and laughing, and then they shut that off. But that is when the real hell happens. Literally, the real hell happens with these kids. And you also mentioned, and I remember holding my daughter when she was crying, telling her that it was going to be okay. And I felt at that point that I was lying to her, because I didn't know if things were going to be okay. And you feel helpless. You really can't do anything. I mean, as much as you would want to trade places, there isn't anything you can do. And these kids, our children, deserve so much more. There's no reason for you to go from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati to get something else done, when millions and billions of dollars are being sent outside of the US. And I'm sorry, I'm raising my voice now, but it's being
no, you
sent
need to.
outside of the US when they could be used for research, for our children, for our future. Somehow we need to
Yeah.
make a difference.
I saw a statistic this year, I think it was, that childhood cancer at 4% gets as much as Starbucks makes in one day in the United States.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's ridiculous.
And
That's
I think I was
ridiculous.
reading that holding my cup of coffee, just literally crying, just thinking how much between Starbucks, the NFL, other organizations, thinking about all these companies that make so much for
And yet,
entertainment. Yeah,
and
when it
yet
comes to
our
live.
yeah, and yet our children get 4 pennies on that every dollar that's being made. That's not, no, I don't know. It's unacceptable, and we will make a difference. And we, again, I've told people, even if it costs me my life, I'm gonna make sure that we will do make a difference for these kids. Right. And Alex, just such an inspirational story, and I've seen the pictures of Alex smiling, and throughout everything, and I didn't even know. I just knew a little bit of what he had gone through, but I mean, having your child on life support, that is something that you mentioned, PTSD. That is something that's going to keep you up at night for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's something that still keeps me up at night every single day. Um, Jessica, do you have any? I know you're looking at doing some organizations in the future when you have some more time, and we will be more than happy here at the Gold Corner to partner up with you or help you out with all of that. But with you all traveling to Cincinnati, do you guys have a GoFundMe, anything to where people can help you all out? Because I know it's a lot, and I know it does take a lot. Do you have anything like that set up?
I appreciate that deeply. But truly, and my husband and I say this every single day, we have, I hope I don't offend or insult anybody who's watching, but we are very lucky. We need nothing because we have Alex. I would much rather anybody who is willing to donate anything, donate it to research. If you do your research and look into foundations that are worthy of it, please donate to research, because even though we went through everything I mentioned, we are lucky because we have Alex. He's in the other room. He's playing on the floor with his brother. He's doing okay. He's been through a lot. We still have a lot to do. But I look at him and that's all we need. I would much rather no family ever have to go through this. And we're going to eventually, whenever we get our life back, make it a mission of ours to make sure that that is the case. But if there's any organizations that you believe, I would love to highlight those.
Okay, and
Leave those in there.
we here at the Gold Corner, like I said, we're a part of a family now, a family that we did not want to be a part of, but we're here. And it's one thing that I say, I tell people, we're a part of a broken family, but we are broken together. And that is what, like you said, all these support groups and everything that we have here, that really has helped us out a lot, because you and I, along with a lot of other parents, can quickly get on the phone, send a message, and we know exactly what we're going through. We know exactly everything, and we can even ask, hey, what helped you, what didn't help you, and we can be of support of each other that way. And that is my goal with the Gold Corner, and that is exactly what I wanted to do, and just talk like that, because sometimes when we do speak about our children, if we do speak about them at any point, it's maybe like a 2, 3, 4, maybe even a 5-minute thing. But I want this channel so we can speak about those specific times that the kids had to go through, that our children had to go through these horrible things, so people can be aware of what childhood cancer is, and what this monster that's robbing our youth, that's robbing our children. And just throughout throughout the holidays, we had a lot of kids pass, but that's what I wanted to do: highlight these kids that fought and got their wings, the kids that are currently fighting, and even the ones that have beat it. I've had a couple of people in season 1 that their children beat cancer, and that is amazing, that is awesome. But these are parents that are going through the same thing, and parents that are going to continue to go through the same thing, unfortunately, until we figure out something that we need to do. Jessica, before we finish, I ask of this of all the parents, because different parents have different perspectives and look at things differently. But with your experience and everything that you've gone through, what advice do you give to parents that are in your shoes and in your situation right now? And what advice do you give to parents that have perfectly healthy children? Because I've actually had a lot of parents with healthy children reach out to me and say, Joel, thank you. Thank you for opening up our eyes to what this is. Now, I just cherish and I value my child a whole lot more. But what advice can you give to those parents?
I mean, to the parents who don't have a cancer child, this year has been a lot. This 2020 specifically, but I think I made a post about this as well. Despite everything that happened, and despite everything everybody's going through, and having to stay inside and all these things, like, I wish that was my biggest worry. Like, I wish that all I had to do was stay inside my house with my children. Consider yourself really lucky. I'll never forget when I was pregnant with Dominic, when the quarantine hit, my biggest worry was not being able to go to Target and to get the baby supplies that I needed to get through the first couple weeks of Dominic's life. Looking back, that's not even a thought in my mind right now. And though at the time it seemed so important, and though at the time being stuck in the house with the kids, or stuck in the house just quarantining seems important, it's not. It's cherish the time that you have, because you are lucky to have that time. You are lucky to have that time with your kids. Hold them tight. I never thought in my life that my child would go through this. Well, I didn't bring this up in the beginning, but it took us years to conceive Alex. It took many, many battles. And after a very long time of trying, we got him. And I was so thankful for him. And over time, toddler life happens, and you get overwhelmed, and you sit there and think like, I just want a minute. I just need a minute alone. And it's like, you are valid in that thought, but you need to realize as well, your children are healthy. Be thankful. Be thankful that you are able to look at them and not sit there and think what medicines are due, or is it dressing change day, or do they need a poke today? or just what we haven't had to think about yet, which is the worst, which is what if he's not here? And I can't even imagine. To the cancer families that are going through this, there is nothing that I can say that makes it any better. And it's something that I don't think you will ever find the perfect words for it. If there is a piece of advice that I can give, it's research, educate yourself, become parent oncologist, be a part of your child's life, be a part of their journey, be a part of their treatment. Realize that they need you as much as they need this treatment. The treatment is important, but so is be there for them. Try to take care of yourself so you can take care of them. And it's harder to do than anything. But your kids also need to see you smiling. And it's really hard. But when you see them smile, consider it a blessing. Because it means that they are still there. It means they are still fighting. So,
Well, Jessica,
and I have no words to say about these kids and how strong they are. They are truly the strongest people I know.
it's like I was mentioning, at the beginning, I said, whenever you see these kids on an oncology floor, running up and down, maybe not right now because of COVID, but, when these kids are walking up and down and everything, and you see them smile, and you don't know everything that they're going through, and in certain situations, like, for example, Mia would be playing around with other kids, and, the following day, you would ask, and that kid passed away overnight. And that is exactly, what a lot of people said with Mia. We didn't know, it's just, it really changes your life. It makes you see things in a different level, in a different perspective, and it makes you value and all these things that are going on. Like you said, quarantine is yeah, it's affected a lot of people, and even over the holidays, if it affected you not being with your family, but your family is still there. You can pick up the phone, you can FaceTime them, and they will be there. There was a lot of empty chairs, over the holidays, ours being one, because children are dying because there's not enough research for childhood cancer. And that should never be the case. And self care, just what Jessica said, self care, it's very important to do that. It is extremely difficult to care for yourself, but you need to have, even if it's a little bit of strength, to be able to, be there for your children. So, Jessica, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being a part of the Gold Corner. Thank you so much. The conversations that we had. And I have a team of prayer warriors. I have a prayer team, and Alex is going to be in our prayers, and we declare healing from head to toe on Alex, and, we're going to continue praying for Alex, and I'm going to have my team of prayer warriors continue to pray, and we're going to declare healing. We're going to declare that he will be cancer free, so please count on us for whatever you need, any future plans that you might have. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this first episode of season 2 of the Gold Corner, hearing the story of this beautiful baby boy warrior, Alex, and everything that he has gone through and everything that he's currently going through right now. I am going to be tagging Jessica and her husband, Mike, on everything that I do post when I do the video. And obviously, when we get this on our YouTube channel, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to them, I'm sure they would be more than happy, to open their, their ears and their eyes, and just talk to you about anything. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to them. You can reach out to me. So again, thank you so much for all the love and support, to all our new subscribers. And this is the Gold Corner. This is who we are. We are a family, a broken family, but we're broken together. So just pray for your children if they're still here and healthy. Pray for them. Pray for the families that have already lost children. And let's pray for our nation, because boy, right now we need it more than ever. And just Remember to live each day to its fullest because tomorrow is not promised. And just hold on a little while longer because we're almost home. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.